Thank you very much for coming along to this Getting Started with RM Unify Management Console. I'm delighted to be joined by Jackie from Education Scotland. I'm also delighted to be joined by Stephen Grant from RM, who will be leading the session. So I'm going to stop presenting my slides and hand over to Stephen. If there's any questions, please add it to the chat or raise your hand and we'll pull you in. All the microphones have been muted, but I'm quite happy to unmute them if there's lots of questions in the chat and you can come in and ask your questions. And as I said earlier, I will be stopping recording at the end of the session so you can add your questions in there as well. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Thank you. So hopefully you guys can see that first screen on there before we continue. All right. As Susan said, my name is Stephen Grant. I am one of the senior GLOW Help Desk engineers. I've been around RM for nearly 25 years now and the GLOW team since 2012. So a little bit of knowledge is in there somewhere. So this morning we're just going to give you a quick overview of the basic functionality of the GLOW dashboard and users, really aimed at a kind of beginner's level to give you an idea of what things we have here. So what we have on screen just now is the first dashboard that a GLOW administrator would see, and we will go over sort of different levels of users within the next 10 minutes or so. I'm not going to go over everything on this screen in the first instance of this sort of format, but we'll go over mainly what we see in the sort of middle here. Yeah. Within GLOW, and this is a test site, so none of these users are live, although some of the accounts created are help desk staff and RM staff. I have hopefully removed anything that shouldn't be seen by anyone. Apologies if there's anything abusive in there, it shouldn't be. But we do have full members of Take That in there, I believe. So you may see them pop around as we go through the users. For people of a certain vintage, there's also a few really strange wrestler names that I found this morning. But all just test users for when some of you guys raise some calls and we have to replicate things as a help desk. So within GLOW, we really only use the top 3 of these types of users. So we obviously have student users, teaching staff users, and non-teaching staff users. At the side here, you can see, and this will be for you guys schools as well, it will obviously be different numbers, but the number of students, teaching staff and non-teaching staff that you have registered within GLOW within your establishments. Now, there can be more users in here than you guys have for the simple reason that there's 2 user types. There's users that can be created manually and there's users that will be entered into GLOW via your CMIS systems. And we call them MIS users. We call the users that are created manual CSV users, basically because they can be created by a CSV, comma-separated account. Okay. Down here, we'll see synchronization status, and this is one of the important things when you guys see some errors maybe, or users that are not in GLOW. The last sync from MIS, which is the last sync from CMIS, you can see that ours is a little bit of time ago, but that's because we don't actually have this connected to CMIS. But you should see that pretty much most days that should be syncing from CMIS to GLOW. And it's basically whenever you add a user, delete a user, or make a change to a user within the CMIS Click and Go programs, which some of you may have control of, and some of you may update and pass through to ourselves. That's a big date if anything goes wrong, and sometimes it's actually very handy to pass that over to the help desk or to your guys' key contacts if they're logging a call with us, because that can prove where some information for users are missing. And as we go on and look at the users themselves, you'll see the sort of information that this can, help update within GLOW. So the role types: student, non-teaching staff, and teaching staff. Very self-explanatory of you guys that you find within the schools, and we're just going to do a quick look at what information GLOW holds on these accounts. So if I click on students, this will give us a different window and will give us all the students that are in our establishment. Now, as we flick through them, you may or may not see that there's a member of Take That. I don't know how he managed to join Glow, but he's certainly in there. You will see some of the users within the help desk as well. You may be aware of some past people as well. But things to notice in this screen is the tick next to the users. So this tells us, if we hover over it, it'll actually tell us that the account is enabled. And if you then go down, we can see that there's an X tick next to them, and it tells us that that user is disabled. And that user will not be able to log in or access anything within Glow. And it is a good way for you guys to manage your users at times if you have a pupil that's left and you still see them in there, or on some occasions where a pupil's been a little naughty and you don't want them having access to the accounts, then it's very simple to actually disable that, and I will show you how to do that, yeah. Other things to notice on this screen is that we have a view at the top here where you can drop down and you've got the ability to change that role type again and see different types of role there rather than going back to the main screen. We can also change the data source. So I mentioned that we have manual accounts and MIS accounts. That's where we would change them so we can actually determine what was created manually by a school or by an individual pupil, an individual administrator, or if it's coming straight from a MIS system from CMIS. There's 3 pages of information to go by. That's just with the number of students that's in this establishment. That will be more or less with you guys. And we can actually filter these by first name, last name, the username, or the email address. So just for instance, in the first name there, if I type just the first 2 initials of something and hit enter, you'll see that it filters it down by user. Okay, and what we get is one of the test users, which is me, and we can see that I'm enabled. And at the end here, we have an actions menu. Now, if I drop down that actions menu, we have the ability to view details. And if I click on view details, you will see what Glow holds on my user that was created. So we have our first name, our last name. The last name would normally be longer than just a G. That's just me being lazy. And then it will give us the display name that's viewed for that user. We also have the email address that Glow will hold for that user. Now, on a normal establishment, so an educational establishment like a school or college, it will be at glow.sch.uk by default. Because this is a test site and it's also not an educational site, we have a second domain. So it's called glowmail.org.uk. And that is the only reason, the difference being, is if it's educational, it's glow.sch.uk, and if it's non-educational, then it's glowmail.org.uk. And this is what I can log into Glow with. I can also log in with my username at the bottom here. So that's something that a lot of people are not aware of. You can log in with both of these the username and the email address. Our establishment that we're looking at is tied to Google, so we do have Google Workplace address in there as well, and that has a different domain as well, which is rm.glow.scot. So sometimes you guys may have to get this information, and this is where you would find it within the user details. Okay. We have a source type. So again, this is where we mentioned MIS or CSV, which is manually created. This one was manually created by myself some time ago, which we'll see just a few fields down. It is enabled and it does not have any rights or access, admin rights, sorry. So it's not a super admin, it's not a password admin, and it's not a launchpad admin, and I will go over them a little bit in more detail shortly. It shows us when the account was created. So this one was some time ago, far longer than I care to admit. And we have the first login date. So that was when I first used this account. All right, which is handy for diagnostics, but sometimes can be handy for you guys, I guess, if you're looking back to. When the account was last updated, you'll see that that was actually today. And it was only about 25 minutes ago, and that's because I changed the password on it so that I could remember it more than anything. And that's obviously the same time because I did change the password, so that tells you the last time the password was reset also. The other field we have, which is a last login date. Now, I have already logged into this account this morning, but why is that not updated? It's not updated because this is run by a script overnight. So the only time you will see the last login date is from 24 hours ago or from the previous day. So when I log into this account tomorrow and look at view details, it will say today's date because the script that updates that part of it has ran overnight. Okay, so if you are particularly looking at a user to find if they've logged into Glow and it doesn't look like they have, if you're checking on that same day, it's not going to update until the following day. Also tells us a role type, but considering we're just looking at that, it does we know it's a student. However, if you're sort of using the system during the day, that is handy just to know where you're sitting. Okay, so within a user, when you have admin rights, you will have this actions menu, and we can change a number of things on here. The ones that I'm going to concentrate on today is that we can go in and we can change that user's username. Okay, so if I click on the username, we get this screen here, and it's got a little warning up here saying that it might take a little bit of time depending on how the users and how the queues are in the background. It's usually fairly quick, and I can go into the username and change it. So if I add an R, for instance, as long as this username hasn't been used in the whole Glow tenancy, then it will allow me to use it. Now, as it stands just now, I've put an R in there. You can see that the save button's not available. This is already in use. Okay. Now, for certain reasons that I'm actually logged in another screen and going to show you another screen, I don't want to change that user right now, but you can go in and change the username of any of your users. Okay. We as a help desk don't advise doing that unless it's really required, because users obviously know their username and so do other systems. Keep it fairly simple if you can, but there is times where a username is required to be changed. Okay, and if I go back to that user again, and we go back to the actions menu, the next thing we're able to do is change the password. Okay, so there's the change password screen. Now, I would imagine most people who use Glow will be aware of certain times when they're forced to change their password, and it requires a certain level of strength within the password. Within these screens, which are admin screens, there isn't a password rule. Okay, so you can get away with changing a password to something fairly simple. All right, so if I change that right now, you will see that it allows me to put a 4-digit password in rather than having a complexity in there. So I'll take it back a character. You can see that the new password must be at least 4 characters long. There is no rule set in here because you are an administrator and you're changing a password for a user. Okay. It's easier as an administrator to put a fairly simple password in. I'm just going to join this one up so it's the same password, and we'll highlight this part here. That's one of the reasons why it's left simple. We want that user to change the password as soon as they log on. When they log on with the password that you've given them, they will be given the screen to change passwords again, and it is then enforced that it's a strength of password they have to have in. Now, the criteria for that is in Glow Connect, and you will be able to see that within the user manual. I'm sure Susan will be able to pass that on if none of you guys have it, the link to it within Glow Connect, but it does give you the full criteria of what's required when a user is changing their password rather than when an administrator is changing the password. And the whole point of this part is to actually emphasize that this is an administrator screen. So you are changing it. There's nothing to stop you putting a valid complex password in here. It just becomes harder to pass to the end user and can cause issues logging on for the first instance. But this would change the password. I don't want to change that password when I log on. So you can take that tick out of the box and not make them change it. That has its own implications. You then know the password. They're not changing it to a complex password. So we would definitely advise that that's used. Because this is a test account and I'm signed in somewhere else, I'm going to leave it as it is. Okay, so if I click on save, you will see that it comes up and says that the password for my account has been updated. Okay, fairly simple to change a password. If we go back to the user and just back to actions, you will see other available options for this user. So I can change the email address, and again, that's very similar to changing the username, because as long as that email address has not been used within Glow. It will refuse to change the email address and tell you that it's already in use. Within here, we also have the ability to disable that user. So you can see that my account is enabled right now. It's got a little tick next to it. If I disable the user, it will actively make that an X, which means that this user cannot log in. All right, you'll see that it just verifies that at the top. I am going to enable it again because we are enabled elsewhere. Okay, there's other things that we can do in there, but they will come on a different session. All right, so deleting user within there. All right, if we go back to the students page, and I can take this filter off, and we'll enable all these again. If we go back, we can then change the role type. So rather than looking at students, let's look at non-teaching staff. And again, I'm just going to put that filter in. Okay, just the same one. Now, what you can see is it just finds another user of mine. So a little bit different this time. We've got full name in, we've got full username in. And if I look at the details of that one, everything's just the same. We've still got all the domains in, we've still got the username and the email address in. We're still a CSV account, but what's different with this one is this one has admin rights. Okay, so we've got the tick next to having super admin rights. And that basically means that this account can see exactly what we're seeing in this demonstration. So we can go in, we can change details, we can add admin roles, we can update the user's accounts and passwords. They must have this right to do that. Okay. You'll see that everything else stays the same, but we can also, because we've given them admin rights, we can revoke them now. All right. Fairly simple stuff, very beginner level of what user details we have. The only other difference we may have is we can have, rather than CSV accounts, we'll have MIS accounts. Now, they will be under teaching staff. This is where we have a few, maybe students. Oh no, sorry, we'll still get a filter on, apologies. So we have a few mocked users under students, I think, I hope. So these are accounts which are tied to MIS. So again, there's some more Take That people. Somebody really likes Take That within the Glow Help Desk. Not me, I may add. So let's pick on Alistair. Alistair's one of our software op engineers who does a lot of testing for Glow. And if we go into the view details of the MIS account, you will see that it is very, very similar to a CSV account. All right. The two parts that are different is we can see that there's an MIS ID which ties up to the CMIS systems, and that's how we tie the users up. And we also have the source from as MIS. Everything else is exactly the same. Okay, but in the background, it's a little different for us. That's all I want to do really on the details. There's not much, there is a lot more complexity to details and how you change things and how things can be manipulated. But I think for this session, I don't want to go too heavily into that. What I'm going to show you is what happens when you sign in as a student or a teacher. Okay, so if I'm just going to change the screen as long as I get it correct. And if we move on to this one. So this is us physically signed in to Glow as a student. So this is the member of that we were looking at was Steph G. Okay, so this is a student login. What you're going to see different is the student has no access to that management console, which would be about here. So a student cannot see any other users, they can't change passwords, they can't view any details. Okay, they are limited to what we decide to give them on the dashboard or the Launchpad here. And that's really all I wanted to show you with that. That's a student. I'm going to show you what happens when we log in as that second teacher and the difference that they get, if I can pick the right screen, hopefully. So this is logged in as a teacher. So it is just S Grant, which was the teacher we used. And you can see that they do have the management console. Okay, this user doesn't currently have any administrator rights. This is just a standard teacher. Now, they do have management rights. They can go in and they can see all the students, but they have no access to look at teachers or non-teaching staff. Okay, again, if we just go back to, we can't, that's the root of the management console. They don't get the ability to see when other role types. With students, the options that they have is only change password. All right, so a teacher can change a student's password without any kind of admin rights, but they can't see or change anyone else's passwords. They also cannot see any further details of the users. So I can't click on Damien, for instance. All I can see is their username and their email address, which can come in handy, or I can change the password as a standard teacher. If we then switch back to our main account, sorry about the switching, but it's the best way I could think of doing it. Let me find the right screen. So this has us back onto the super admin account that we were looking at beginning of. So go back to the management console, you can see that we have all the details again. If I go into one of the teachers and I go into the one that we were looking at there, again, just going to be one of my accounts. Let me just clear this. And we look at the details again. This is the user that was logged in, so no admin rights. We already gave a user super admin rights, which gives them ability to do everything. We can give a user password admin rights. Having password admin rights means that they will be able to change all passwords. Okay, so you can give that to a teacher if you think you want them to take that role on. So they'll not only will they be able to change the standard students, they'll be able to change teachers and non-teaching staff passwords. Launchpad admin rights basically means that they're able to manipulate and change the school's launchpad. So the launchpad that we log into here with the school, they'll be able to move these tiles around, create different ones, give them a different order, make things a bit more prominent in certain levels, and they'll have this sort of edit launchpad button. Again, a demo for another day. Okay, I think that's probably enough that you want to listen to for that sort of small amount of time and maybe digest. If there's anything else we need to go over or you'd like to go over, then please feel free to give a shout, yeah.
I'm just going to stop the recording just now and I might get some questions.